I won $50 million in the lottery, and my hands were shaking so hard I could barely hold the ticket. I grabbed my 3-year-old son Marcus and rushed to my husband's office to tell him the news that would change our lives forever. But when I reached his door, I heard sounds that shattered my world. His voice mixed with another woman's laughter, intimate whispers that cut through me like a knife. And in that moment, standing frozen outside that door, I made a decision that would lead them both straight to their destruction. My name is Denise, and if you had asked me what my life looked like before that Tuesday morning, I would have told you it was simple, quiet, maybe even a little boring. My husband, Raymond Carter, was the owner of a small but growing logistics company in Charlotte, North Carolina. He was my high school sweetheart, my first everything, the only man I had ever loved. We got married right after college, and for 7 years I believed we had built something beautiful together. When our son Marcus came along 4 years ago, I quit my marketing job without hesitation. Raymond said it made sense, that the company needed every dollar reinvested, that my staying home would save us money on childcare. I believed him because I trusted him with my whole heart. I became the perfect housewife, waking up at 5 to make his breakfast, ironing his shirts until they were crisp, keeping our modest townhouse spotless. I clipped coupons, bought generic brands, wore the same 3 dresses on rotation so Raymond could have nice suits for his business meetings. He worked long hours, sometimes not coming home until midnight, and I never complained. I told myself that's what good wives do. They support their husbands through the hard times. Looking back now, I was so blind it makes me sick. That Tuesday started like any other. I woke up, made Raymond his eggs and toast, packed Marcus's little backpack for his morning playgroup, and started my cleaning routine. While wiping down the kitchen counter, I found a crumpled lottery ticket stuck to the bottom of my purse. I had bought it 3 days earlier at the Harris Teeter when I was grocery shopping. There was this elderly man selling tickets near the entrance, and he looked so tired, so hopeless, that I felt bad walking past him. I never played the lottery, thought it was a waste of money, but something made me stop that day. I picked numbers connected to our family, Raymond's birthday, Marcus's birthday, our anniversary. Now, staring at that wrinkled ticket, I almost threw it away, but something told me to check it just for fun. I pulled out my phone and went to the North Carolina lottery website. The winning numbers from the previous night's drawing appeared on my screen. My heart stopped. 7, 14, 22, 31, 45, and the Powerball 12. I looked at my ticket. 7, 14, 22, 31, 45, 12. I checked again, and again, and again. $50 million. I had won $50 million. The phone slipped from my fingers and clattered onto the tile floor. I sat down hard, right there in the middle of the kitchen, my legs giving out completely. This couldn't be real. Things like this didn't happen to people like me, ordinary women in ordinary lives with ordinary problems. But there it was, those 6 numbers staring back at me, promising a future I had never dared to imagine. After the initial shock wore off, a wave of pure joy crashed over me. I started crying, laughing, both at the same time. Marcus came running from the living room, his little face worried. "Mommy okay? Mommy sad?" I scooped him up and spun him around until we were both dizzy. "Mommy is very, very happy, baby. Mommy just got the best news ever." My mind raced with possibilities. We could pay off the mortgage. We could send Marcus to the best private school in Charlotte. We could take that vacation to Disney World I had been dreaming about for years. And Raymond, my hardworking husband, wouldn't have to struggle anymore. His company, the long hours, the stress that made him snap at me sometimes, all of that would disappear. I couldn't wait to tell him. I imagined his face when he heard the news, how he would pick me up and swing me around like he used to when we were dating, how he would finally look at me with love instead of exhaustion and irritation. I had to go to him right now. I couldn't wait until evening. I grabbed my purse, carefully tucking the ticket into the zippered inside pocket. I dressed Marcus in his little blue jacket and sneakers, my hands trembling the whole time. "Baby, we're going to see Daddy at work. Mommy has a big surprise for him." Marcus clapped his hands, excited about any adventure. I called an Uber because our only car was with Raymond, and the whole ride to his office my heart pounded so loud I was sure the driver could hear it. Raymond's company was in a small office building in the South End, just 3 rooms and a reception area, but he was so proud of it. I had helped him find the location, had stayed up countless nights helping him with proposals and spreadsheets. This company was as much mine as it was his, or so I thought. The receptionist, a young woman named Brittany, looked up when I walked in with Marcus. Her smile seemed forced, her eyes flickering with something I couldn't quite read. "Mrs. Carter, what a surprise. Is Mr. Carter expecting you?" "No, I wanted to surprise him. Is he in his office?" Brittany hesitated just for a second, but I noticed. "He's, in a meeting, but I'm not sure if." "Don't worry, I'll just peek in. I want to see his face when I tell him the news." I didn't wait for her response. I knew this office like the back of my hand. I had spent hours here in the early days, answering phones, filing paperwork, doing whatever Raymond needed. I walked down the short hallway toward his office, Marcus's small hand in mine, my heart full of excitement and love. But then I heard it. A giggle, high-pitched, flirtatious, definitely not the sound of a business meeting. I stopped dead in my tracks. Raymond's voice came next, low and intimate in a way I hadn't heard in years. "Patience, baby. Once I get rid of her, we'll have everything. She's too stupid to suspect anything. The company, the house, everything will be ours." My blood turned to ice. I pressed myself against the wall, one hand covering Marcus's mouth to keep him quiet. He looked up at me with confused eyes, but thankfully stayed silent. The woman's voice again, and this time I recognized it. It was Jasmine, the accountant Raymond had hired 6 months ago. She was young, pretty, always wearing tight dresses and too much perfume. I had met her at the company Christmas party, and she had been so friendly to me, complimenting my dress, asking about Marcus. And the whole time, "So what's the plan exactly?" Jasmine asked. "I've already set it up," Raymond said, his voice casual, almost bored. "The company books show massive losses. On paper, we're drowning in debt. When we divorce, she'll think there's nothing to split. In fact, I'll convince her she owes money. She's so naive she'll sign anything I put in front of her. She'll leave with nothing, and I'll keep everything, including this." I heard the sound of a kiss, wet and lingering, and then Jasmine's breathy laugh. "What about the kid?" Raymond snorted. "He's useful for now. Makes me look like a devoted family man. Once everything's settled, I'll let her keep him. Less hassle for me. Maybe later, if I need leverage, I'll fight for custody. But honestly, kids are just..." More kissing sounds. The rest of his words were lost in sounds I couldn't bear to hear, sounds that made my stomach heave. I stood frozen in that hallway, my world collapsing around me. 7 years. 7 years of my life given to this man. I had sacrificed my career, my friendships, my identity. I had worn the same worn-out shoes for 3 years so he could have expensive loafers. I had eaten rice and beans for weeks so he could take clients to steakhouses. And this was what I meant to him. A stupid woman. A convenient tool. A problem to be disposed of. The lottery ticket in my pocket suddenly felt like it was burning through the fabric. $50 million. $50 million that this man would steal from me if he knew. That would fund his new life with his mistress while I was left with nothing. Marcus tugged at my hand, sensing something was wrong. I looked down at my son, at his innocent face, and something inside me shifted. The devastation hardened into something cold and sharp. I wasn't going to cry. I wasn't going to burst in there and make a scene. That's what the old Denise would have done, the naive, trusting Denise who believed in love and loyalty and happily ever after. That Denise was dead. The woman standing in this hallway with fire in her veins was someone new. I bent down and whispered in Marcus's ear. "We have to be very quiet, okay, baby? Like a game, we're going to sneak out like little mice." Marcus nodded solemnly, always eager to play along. I tiptoed back down the hallway, my heart pounding but my mind crystal clear. Brittany looked up as I passed the reception desk. "Leaving so soon? You didn't even." I forced a weak smile. I started feeling dizzy. Must be coming down with something. "I'll come back another day. Please don't tell Raymond I was here. I want the surprise to be perfect." She nodded, though her eyes held a knowing look that made me wonder how much she had figured out. I didn't care. I had bigger things to worry about. Outside, the Charlotte sun was blinding. I stood on the sidewalk, holding Marcus, and for a moment I just breathed. In and out, in and out. The old Denise would have collapsed in tears. The new Denise had a plan to make. I ordered another Uber and we went home. I put Marcus down for his nap, then locked myself in the bathroom and turned on the shower to muffle my sounds. I sat on the cold tile floor and finally let myself cry. But even as the tears streamed down my face, my mind was working, calculating, planning. I had $50 million. Raymond thought I was stupid. Raymond thought I would sign whatever he put in front of me. Raymond thought he could throw me away like garbage and ride off into the sunset with his mistress. He had no idea what was coming. I dried my tears and looked at myself in the mirror. A tired woman stared back at me, red-eyed and pale, but there was something new in her gaze. Steel. I spent the next 3 days acting completely normal. I made Raymond's breakfast, kissed him goodbye, listened to him complain about how hard work was. Every word out of his mouth was poison now, but I smiled and nodded and played my part. Meanwhile, my mind never stopped working. The first problem was the lottery ticket. If I claimed the prize myself, Raymond would find out. North Carolina was one of those states where lottery winners' names become public record. Even if I tried to hide it, he would discover the truth during divorce proceedings. Any money I won during our marriage would be considered marital property. He would be entitled to half. Unless I could prove he was the one hiding assets. Unless I could prove he was planning to defraud me. Unless I was smarter than he thought I was. I needed someone I could trust absolutely, someone who would never betray me, someone whose name Raymond would never think to investigate. My mother. My mother Gladys lived in a small town outside of Fayetteville, about 2 hours from Charlotte. She was a retired school teacher, sharp as a tack despite her 68 years, and she had never liked Raymond. She called him slick, said he smiled too much and meant too little. I had dismissed her concerns as overprotective mother syndrome. Now I realized she had seen what I was too blinded by love to notice. I told Raymond I wanted to take Marcus to visit my mother for a few days. I played up the sickness angle, said the fresh country air would help me recover. He seemed almost relieved to have me gone. Of course, baby. Take your time. I'll be fine here. I'm sure you will, I thought, but I just smiled and kissed his cheek. The drive to my mother's house felt like driving toward freedom. Marcus sang along to children's songs on the radio while I gripped the steering wheel and rehearsed what I would say. When my mother opened her door and saw my face, she knew immediately something was wrong. "Denise, honey, what happened? Come inside right now." I waited until Marcus was settled in front of cartoons with a juice box, then I took my mother to the kitchen, sat her down and told her everything. The lottery, the office, Raymond and Jasmine. The fake debts, the plan to leave me with nothing. My mother's face went through a dozen emotions: shock, horror, fury, and finally something like grim satisfaction. I knew that man was no good. I knew it from the first time he shook my hand with that car salesman's smile. "But honey, are you sure? Maybe you misheard." "I didn't mishear, Mama. I heard every word. He called me stupid. He said he would take everything and leave me with nothing." And the worst part, I choked on the words, he talked about Marcus like he was an object, a tool to be used and discarded. My mother's eyes went hard. "What do you need from me?" I pulled the lottery ticket from my purse and placed it on the table between us. "I need you to claim this for me. I need you to put the money in an account Raymond will never find. And I need you to keep this secret until I'm ready to destroy him." My mother picked up the ticket with trembling hands. She looked at it for a long moment, then looked at me. "You're sure about this? About all of it?" I nodded. "I've never been more sure of anything in my life." "Then let's do it." My mother, God bless her, was a fast learner. Within a week, she had done everything I asked. She went to the lottery office wearing dark glasses and a hat, claimed the prize, and chose the anonymous option that would keep her name out of the press. After federal and state taxes, we ended up with about $34 million deposited into a new account at a credit union Raymond had never heard of. The money was safe. Now I needed evidence. Raymond came home from work a few days after I returned from my mother's, looking more stressed than usual. But underneath the stress, I could see something else, a gleam of anticipation. He was moving forward with his plan. He sat me down after dinner with a serious expression. "Denise, I need to talk to you about something important." I arranged my face into concern. "What is it, honey? You're scaring me." He sighed dramatically. "The company is in trouble, serious trouble. I've been trying to protect you from it, but things have gotten bad. We're looking at massive debt. I might have to declare bankruptcy." My heart was pounding, but I kept my expression worried and naive. "Oh no, Raymond. How much debt?" He named a figure. $150,000. "We might lose everything, Denise. The house, the cars, everything." I reached out and touched his hand, fighting the urge to recoil. "What can I do to help?" Raymond's eyes flickered with something I now recognized as calculation. "There might be some documents I need you to sign. Legal stuff to protect what little we have left. I'll bring them home soon." "Of course," I said softly. "Whatever you need. I'll sign anything to help our family." He smiled, and for the first time I saw it for what it really was, the smile of a predator who thinks he's cornered his prey. That night, after Raymond fell asleep, I slipped out of bed and went to his home office. He kept it locked, but I knew where he hid the spare key. Inside, I found exactly what I was looking for: two sets of books. One showed a company drowning in debt. The other showed a thriving business with healthy profits, money being funneled into a separate account under a company called Carter Legacy Holdings. I photographed everything with my phone, my hands steady despite my racing heart. Contracts, bank statements, tax documents that showed years of fraud. Raymond hadn't just been planning to cheat me. He had been cheating the IRS for years. I also found something else, something that made my blood boil. Receipts for jewelry, designer clothes, a down payment on a luxury condo. All gifts for Jasmine, all hidden from me while I wore second-hand dresses and clipped coupons. I had everything I needed, but I wasn't finished yet. The next few weeks were the hardest of my life. I had to pretend everything was normal while my husband plotted my destruction. I had to smile and cook dinner and make love to a man I now despised with every fiber of my being. But I was playing a long game, and I was going to win. I started my counterattack slowly. First, I reached out to a lawyer, not a family attorney, but a former federal prosecutor who specialized in financial crimes. Her name was Patricia Webb, and she had a reputation for being absolutely ruthless. I paid her retainer with cash my mother wired me. "Mrs. Carter," she said after reviewing my evidence, "your husband is looking at serious federal charges. Tax evasion, fraud, potentially money laundering depending on how deep this goes. What exactly do you want to accomplish here? I want to divorce him without him getting a single penny of my money. I want him to face consequences for what he's done. And I want full custody of my son with no visitation rights for a man who talked about his child like a piece of furniture." Patricia smiled, a sharp, dangerous smile. "I think we can arrange all of that." While Patricia worked on the legal strategy, I focused on the next phase, destroying Raymond's business the same way he planned to destroy my life. This part required another ally, someone who knew the logistics industry, someone who had reason to hate Raymond as much as I did. His name was Derek, and 3 years ago, Raymond had stolen his biggest client through underhanded tactics, spreading rumors that Derek's company was unreliable, bribing the client's purchasing manager. Derek's company had nearly gone under. He had lost his marriage, his savings, almost his sanity. I found him running a struggling one-truck operation out of a warehouse in Gastonia. He was suspicious when I first approached him, convinced I was there to spy for Raymond. But when I showed him the evidence of how Raymond conducted business, the bribes, the fraud, the lies, his suspicion turned to shock and then to cold fury. That son of a bitch. I knew he cheated, but I could never prove it. "Why are you showing me this?" "Because I want to destroy him," I said simply, "and I have the money to make it happen." Over the next 2 months, I invested $300,000 in Derek's company. We didn't compete directly with Raymond at first. Instead, we went after his suppliers, offering better deals, locking in exclusive contracts. We poached his best drivers by offering higher wages and actual benefits. We reached out to his clients with lower prices and better service. Raymond started coming home angrier and angrier. First, he lost one contract, then another. His best dispatcher quit. A major supplier cut him off. He couldn't understand what was happening, couldn't figure out who was behind it. Meanwhile, Jasmine was getting impatient. I know because I had hired a private investigator to document their relationship. I had photographs of them together, recordings of their conversations, evidence of the apartment he was paying for with money that should have been supporting his family. One night, Raymond came home drunk and furious. He had lost another client that day, a big one. He blamed everyone but himself, his employees, the economy, bad luck. When I tried to comfort him, he shoved me away. "Don't touch me. You don't understand anything about business. You're just a housewife." I let the insult wash over me. It would be one of the last he ever threw my way. The next morning, Raymond presented me with divorce papers. He had clearly been planning this for a while, probably moved up the timeline because of his business troubles. He needed my signature to access the assets he thought were hidden in his shell company. He sat me down with a practiced look of sadness. "Denise, this isn't working anymore. I think we both know it." I put on my best devastated face. "But Raymond, I love you. We can work through this. We have a son together." He shook his head. "It's too late. The business problems, the stress, it's too much. I think we'll both be happier apart." And then the cruelest part, the part that showed exactly who he was: "I know things are tough financially. With the business debts, there won't be much to split. But I'm willing to let you keep the car, give you a few months to find a place. I think it's the fairest solution for everyone." Fair. He thought taking everything and leaving me with a used Honda was fair. I pretended to cry. And Mucka's? Rumond waved his hand dismissively. We can share custody. I mean, I'll be busy rebuilding, but I want to be part of his life. I looked at the papers through my fake tears. There it was, everything Patrusha had predicted. The clause about taking on half the fabricated debt. The quick timeline designed to prevent me from getting my own lawyer. The custody agreement that would let him use Mucka's as leverage whenever convenient. I'll need a few days to read through this, I said quietly. I want to make sure I understand everything. Rumond's expression flickered with impatience, but he nodded. Of course, take a day or two, but don't take too long. The sooner we finalize this, the sooner we can both move on. That night I called Patrusha. It's time, I said. He gave me the papers. Patrusha's voice was calm and steady. Then let's show him what happens when he underestimates you. I'll see you in court. 3 weeks later, we were in front of a judge, but it wasn't the quick, simple proceeding Rumond had expected. He walked into that courtroom with Jasmine by his side, both of them dressed like they were headed to a celebration rather than a divorce hearing. He had hired a cheap lawyer because he thought this was a formality. He thought I would have no representation, no evidence, no fight in me. The look on his face when Patrusha Wubb stood up to represent me was almost worth 7 years of marriage to a monster. Almost. The Honorable Judge Williams presided over our case. She was a stern black woman in her 60s who had clearly seen every trick in the book and had no patience for any of them. Rumond's lawyer started with the narrative Rumond had prepared. He talked about the struggling business, the mounting debts, the reasonable division of limited assets. He portrayed Rumond as a hardworking man trying to do right by his family despite financial hardship. When he finished, Patrusha stood up slowly. Your Honor, I'd like to present some evidence that paints a very different picture of Mr. Carter and his supposed financial hardship. The first piece of evidence was the real accounting books. The spreadsheets, the bank statements, the paper trail that showed Rumond's company was actually profitable, very profitable, with hundreds of thousands of dollars hidden in Carter legacy holdings. Rumond's face went white. The second piece of evidence was documentation of his relationship with Jasmine. Photographs of them together, receipts for gifts, records of the apartment lease in her name that he paid for. The affair that he had conducted while pretending to work late nights. But I wasn't finished yet. Jasmine shifted uncomfortably in her seat, her earlier confidence evaporating. The third piece of evidence was recordings of Rumond discussing his plan to defraud me. I had continued monitoring his conversations in the weeks after I discovered the affair. Patrusha played them for the court, Rumond's own voice damning him. She's too stupid to suspect anything. She'll sign whatever I put in front of her. She'll leave with nothing. The courtroom was silent. Judge Williams's expression could have frozen lava. Finally, Patrusha delivered the killing blow. Your Honor, my client has also discovered evidence of significant tax fraud committed by Mr. Carter. This evidence has been turned over to the IRS and the FBI's Financial Crimes Division. We expect federal charges to be filed within the week. Rumond shot to his feet. This is entrapment. She's lying. Order, Judge Williams snapped. Mr. Carter, you will sit down and be quiet, or I will have you removed from my courtroom. He sat, but his eyes were wild, panicked, the eyes of a trapped animal. The hearing continued, but the outcome was never in doubt. Rumond got nothing. No alimony, no asset division, nothing. His attempt to hide assets proved he had already removed himself from any claim to community property. His affair and recorded statements about abandoning his son resulted in sole custody for me with no visitation rights without supervision. And when the IRS agents arrived at his apartment 3 days later with an arrest warrant, I was there across the street, watching. I didn't say a word. I didn't need to. The look on his face when he saw me standing there with my arms crossed and a calm smile, that was all the closure I needed. Rumond was sentenced to 4 years in federal prison for tax evasion and fraud. His company was seized, his assets frozen. The condo he had been planning to share with Jasmine was sold at auction. Speaking of Jasmine, she disappeared the moment Rumond's money did. She took the jewelry he had given her and vanished, probably to find another wealthy man to deceive. I almost felt sorry for whoever she found next. Almost. As for me, I built a new life. I moved Mucka's and myself to a beautiful house in the best school district in Charlotte. I enrolled him in a Montessori school where he flourished, finally free from the tension that had always simmered in our home. I brought my mother up from Fayetteville to live with us, giving her the comfortable retirement she deserved. I invested wisely, started a foundation to help women escaping abusive and manipulative relationships. I partnered with Durrock's company, now called Carter and Wubb Logistics, and watched it grow into one of the most successful shipping companies in the Southeast. Durrock became a trusted friend and business partner. He had lost everything to Rumund's schemes once. Helping him rebuild, helping him succeed, was almost as satisfying as watching Rumund fall. 1 year after the divorce, I visited Rumund in prison. I don't know why I went. Maybe I needed to see with my own eyes that the nightmare was really over. He looked terrible, pale and thin, with dark circles under his eyes. Prison didn't suit him. He had always needed designer clothes and expensive cologne to feel like a man. In his orange jumpsuit, he was just another criminal. "Why are you here?" he asked, his voice bitter. "To gloat?" "No," I said honestly. "I came to tell you something. You called me stupid. You thought I was too naive to see what you were doing. But here's what you never understood, Rumund. I was never stupid. I was trusting. There's a difference. I trusted you because I loved you. I believed your lies because I wanted them to be true. That wasn't weakness. That was hope. You took my hope and you crushed it. You took my love and you mocked it. And in the end, you lost everything while I gained more than I ever dreamed possible." He was silent, his jaw clenched. I stood up to leave, then turned back one last time. "And just so you know, the $50 million I won, the lottery ticket I was coming to tell you about that day, it's mine now, every penny. Have a nice life, Rumund." I walked out of that prison and never looked back. Today, 5 years after that terrible day when I heard my husband planning my destruction, my life is more beautiful than I ever imagined. Muckas is 9 now, a bright, happy, confident boy who asks about his father sometimes, but has accepted that some people aren't safe to be around. My mother lives in a cottage on my property, tending her garden and spoiling her grandson. I rummarried 2 years ago, a quiet, kind man named Thomas who treats Muckas like his own son. He knows my whole story and loves me not despite it, but because of it. He says I'm the strongest woman he's ever met. I don't know about strong. I just know I refuse to let a cruel man define my ending. I took everything he tried to steal from me, my future, my security, my dignity, and I built something beautiful from the ashes. Sometimes I drive past the building where Rumund's company used to be. It's a yoga studio now. Muckas takes classes there on Saturdays. He'll never know that's where his mother's old life ended and her new one began, and that's okay. Some stories are just for us to keep. Last week, while we were flying kites in the park, Muckas looked up at me with his father's eyes but his grandmother's smile. "Mom," he said, "do you think we're the luckiest family in the whole world?" I pulled him close and kissed the top of his head. "I think luck is what we make it, baby, and we've made something pretty wonderful." The kite soared higher, a bright red splash against the Carolina blue sky. My husband was grilling nearby, my mother was reading under a tree, and my son was laughing in my arms. I had $34 million in the bank, a thriving business, a foundation that had helped hundreds of women rebuild their lives. But none of that mattered as much as this moment, this peace, this joy that no amount of money could buy and no cruel man could ever take away. The story that started with betrayal ended with something better than revenge. It ended with happiness. It ended with healing. It ended with a woman who discovered she was never the country bumpkin or the naive fool her husband believed her to be. She was a survivor, a fighter, a mother who would burn down the world to protect her son. And she lived happily ever after, with the biggest smile you've ever seen. I should tell you more about how everything unfolded in those critical months between discovering Raymond's betrayal and watching him get handcuffed outside his apartment, because the devil was truly in the details, and every single step I took was calculated with precision I had never known I possessed. After I returned from my mother's house, with the lottery money safely deposited in her name, I knew I had to play the longest and most dangerous game of my life. Raymond thought he knew me, but he only knew the woman I had been, the trusting wife who believed every word that came out of his lying mouth. The new Denise was someone he had never met, and she was about to destroy everything he held dear. The first thing I did was start keeping a journal, not a physical one, that Raymond might find, but a secure digital document stored in a cloud account he knew nothing about. Every night after he fell asleep, I would slip into the bathroom, lock the door, and document everything. Every lie he told me, every late night at work that I now knew meant he was with Jasmine, every condescending comment about how I didn't understand business or money or the real world. I wrote it all down with dates and times because I knew that when the time came, every single detail would matter. I also started paying closer attention to his patterns and his habits. Raymond had become careless over the years because he genuinely believed I was too stupid to notice anything. He would leave his phone on the kitchen counter while he showered, and I memorized his passcode by watching his fingers move across the screen. I never touched his phone when he was home because I couldn't risk him catching me, but I filed that information away for later use. Meanwhile, I had to deal with the emotional toll of living with a man who was actively planning to destroy me. Some nights I would lie awake next to him listening to him breathe, and I would feel such rage that it scared me. I wanted to scream at him to shake him awake and demand to know how he could do this to me, to us, to our son. But I swallowed that rage, and I used it as fuel because revenge served cold is always sweeter than revenge served hot and messy. The hardest part was Marcus, my beautiful, innocent boy who loved his daddy and didn't understand why mommy sometimes looked sad. I had to protect him from all of this ugliness while simultaneously building a case that would ensure Raymond never got meaningful custody. Every time Raymond ignored Marcus or snapped at him or pushed him away because he was too busy with work, I documented it. Every time Marcus asked why daddy never played with him anymore, I wrote it down. I was building a portrait of a man who had no business being a father, and I was doing it one brushstroke at a time. About 3 weeks after I discovered the affair, I decided I needed to see Jasmine up close. I needed to understand what kind of woman would knowingly help a man destroy his family. I told Raymond I was taking Marcus to a mommy and me class at the community center, and instead I drove to Raymond's office. I parked across the street and I waited. Around noon, Jasmine came out wearing a tight red dress and sky-high heels, looking every bit the mistress she was. She walked to a little cafe on the corner, and I followed her inside. I ordered a coffee and sat at a table near hers, pretending to scroll through my phone while I watched her. She was pretty, I had to admit that. Younger than me by maybe 5 years, with flawless makeup and hair that looked like she spent hours on it every morning. She radiated confidence, the kind that comes from knowing you're desired, from knowing you have power over someone. But there was something else too, something hungry and calculating in her eyes. This was not a woman in love. This was a woman on the make looking for a meal ticket, and she had decided my husband was it. As I watched her eat her salad and check her phone, I felt a strange calm settle over me. I had been so afraid of this woman without even realizing it. I had felt inadequate compared to her youth and beauty and sophistication. But now I saw her for what she really was, just another schemer, just another opportunist who would move on to the next mark as soon as Raymond's money dried up. She wasn't my competition. She was my husband's accomplice, and she would go down with him. I finished my coffee and left without ever speaking to her. But I had what I needed. I had seen the enemy face to face, and I was no longer afraid. That night Raymond came home late as usual, reeking of expensive perfume that definitely wasn't mine. He kissed my cheek and asked what was for dinner, like he hadn't just been in bed with another woman. I smiled and told him I made his favorite pot roast and mashed potatoes. He ate 3 helpings and complimented my cooking, and I imagined what his face would look like when federal agents slapped handcuffs on his wrists. It was the only thing that got me through that dinner. The next phase of my plan involved gathering more concrete evidence, and for that I needed access to Raymond's office after hours. I knew the building had security cameras, but I also knew that Raymond often worked late and had a key to the back entrance. I had made a copy of that key years ago when we were first married back, when I still helped out at the company, and he still pretended to appreciate my contributions. One Tuesday night, when Raymond was supposedly at a business dinner, but was actually with Jasmine, I told him I was having a girls' night with some old friends from college. Friends I hadn't actually spoken to in years, because Raymond had slowly isolated me from everyone who mattered to me. But he didn't know that, and he was too self-absorbed to care. I dropped Marcus off at my neighbor's house, claiming I needed a few hours to myself, and I drove to Raymond's office building. The back entrance was just as I remembered, and my copied key still worked. Inside, the office was dark and quiet. I used the flashlight on my phone to navigate to Jasmine's desk first. She was the accountant, which meant she had access to all the financial records. Her desk was neat and organized with a framed photo of her and Raymond tucked into the corner. The photo made my stomach turn, but I pushed past it and started going through her files. Most of what I found was unremarkable normal business documents and client files. But in the bottom drawer, locked with a cheap little lock that I picked with a bobby pin, I found the mother lode. A folder labeled CL Holdings, containing printed records of every transaction Raymond had made to his shell company. Deposit slips, bank statements, transfer records, all of it. I photographed every single page. Then I moved to Raymond's office. His computer was password protected, but I remembered his password habits. He always used some combination of his birthday and our anniversary. The irony of him using our wedding date to protect his criminal activities was not lost on me. I tried a few combinations, and on the fourth try, I got in. His email was even more damaging than the paper files. Messages to Jasmine discussing their plans for after the divorce. Messages to his accountant friend, who had helped set up the shell company. Messages to a lawyer discussing how to structure the divorce to maximize his take and minimize mine. I forwarded everything to a new email account I had created specifically for this purpose, then deleted the forwarded messages from his sent folder. I was careful to leave no trace that I had ever been there. By the time I left the office, I had enough evidence to bury Raymond 10 times over, but I still wanted more. I wanted to make absolutely sure that when I struck, there would be no possibility of him wriggling out of it. The next morning, I called Patricia Webb and told her what I had found. She was pleased but cautious. "This is excellent, Mrs. Carter, but we need to be careful about how we use it. Some of this evidence might be considered illegally obtained depending on how a judge views it." "I don't care how it was obtained," I said firmly. "I care about results. You said you were ruthless. Prove it." There was a pause on the other end of the line, then a low chuckle. "I like you, Mrs. Carter. You've got steel in your spine. Let me think about how to approach this." She called me back 2 days later with a plan. Instead of using the evidence directly in the divorce proceedings, we would use it to trigger federal investigations. Once the IRS and FBI were involved, they would obtain their own evidence through legal means, and Raymond would have no grounds to claim his rights were violated. Meanwhile, we would build the divorce case around the affair and his documented neglect of Marcus. The financial crimes would be a separate matter, handled by people with badges and guns. I agreed to her plan, and we set the wheels in motion. Patricia had contacts at the IRS from her days as a federal prosecutor. She knew exactly how to package the information I had gathered to trigger an audit. Within 2 weeks, Raymond's company was flagged for investigation. Of course, Raymond didn't know any of this. He was too busy with Jasmine, too busy plotting my downfall to notice the storm clouds gathering on his horizon. He continued to come home late and lie to my face about working hard for our family. He continued to drop hints about the company's financial troubles, laying the groundwork for the fake debt he planned to saddle me with. And I continued to smile and nod and play the perfect naive wife while counting down the days until his world collapsed. The one thing I hadn't anticipated was how the stress would start to affect Raymond's behavior at home. As his business began to struggle thanks to my investments in Derek's company and Patricia's behind-the-scenes maneuvering, he became increasingly irritable and short-tempered. He snapped at me for minor things like dinner being 5 minutes late or Marcus's toys being left in the living room. He started drinking more, coming home with whiskey on his breath and a mean look in his eyes. One night, about 2 months before everything came to a head, he came home drunker than I had ever seen him. Marcus was already asleep, and I was in the kitchen cleaning up. Raymond stumbled in and looked at me with an expression I had never seen before, pure contempt mixed with something darker. "You know what I realized today?" He slurred, leaning against the counter. "I realized I wasted my life on you. I wasted 7 years on a woman who can't even dress herself properly, who has no ambition, no drive, nothing to offer except being a decent cook. And honestly, even your cooking has gotten boring lately." I stood very still, my hands in the soapy water, my heart pounding. This was different from his usual condescension. This felt dangerous. "Raymond," I said quietly, keeping my voice calm, "you've had a lot to drink. Why don't you go to bed and we can talk in the morning?" He laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. "Talk? What's there to talk about? How you've let yourself go? How you sit around this house all day doing nothing while I work myself to death trying to keep us afloat? You're dead weight, Denise. You always have been." He took a step toward me and I tensed, ready to run if I needed to. but he just stood there swaying, slightly looking at me like I was something disgusting he had found on the bottom of his shoe. Jasmine, he said her name like it was a precious jewel. Jasmine understands me. She appreciates me. She's beautiful and ambitious, and she actually makes something of herself. Not like you, just sitting here waiting for me to come home and fix everything. I should have kept my mouth shut. I should have let him rant and stumble off to bed. But something snapped inside me, and before I could stop myself, words were coming out of my mouth. Jasmine is using you, Raymond. She doesn't love you. She loves your money. The moment your money disappears, so will she. He moved faster than I expected. One moment he was across the kitchen, and the next his hand was around my arm, squeezing hard enough to leave bruises. What did you say? His voice was quiet now, almost calm, and that scared me more than the shouting. I said, she's using you. I kept my voice steady even though I was terrified. She's a gold digger, Raymond. Anyone with eyes can see it. He squeezed harder, and I gasped in pain. You don't know anything about her. You don't know anything about me. You're just a pathetic little housewife who can't accept that her husband found someone better. He released me suddenly, and I stumbled back against the counter, clutching my arm. He looked at his hand like he was surprised by what it had done, then looked at me with something almost like fear. Don't tell anyone about this, he said, his voice rough. You fell. You tripped and hit your arm on the counter. Understand? I nodded, unable to speak. He turned and walked out of the kitchen, and a moment later I heard the bedroom door slam. I stood there shaking for a long time. Then I pulled out my phone and took pictures of the bruises already forming on my arm. I documented everything, including his words about Jasmine and his threat not to tell anyone. I sent the photos to Patricia with a brief explanation. Her response came within minutes. This changes everything. We can add domestic violence to the case. Are you safe right now? I texted back that I was safe, that he had passed out drunk and wouldn't remember any of this in the morning. She told me to be careful and to call her immediately if anything else happened. That night, I barely slept. I lay on the couch with all the lights on, listening for any sound from the bedroom. Marcus slept peacefully in his room, unaware that his mother's world had just gotten a lot more complicated. In the morning, Raymond woke up with a hangover and no memory of what he had done. He saw the bruises on my arm and frowned. What happened to you? I fell, I said, just like he had told me to. Hit my arm on the counter. He nodded, accepting the lie without question, and went to take a shower. I watched him go, and I felt something I had never felt before. Genuine hatred. Not anger, not hurt, not disappointment, but pure cold hatred. He had put his hands on me. He had threatened me in my own kitchen while my son slept down the hall. And he didn't even remember. That morning, I made a decision. I wasn't just going to take Raymond's money and his freedom. I was going to take everything. His reputation, his dignity, his sense of self. I was going to make sure that when I was finished with him, he would have nothing left. Not even his precious Jasmine. The next few weeks were a blur of preparation. Patricia filed emergency motions based on the evidence of domestic violence. She contacted Jasmine's previous employers and discovered that this wasn't her first time being involved with a married boss. There was a pattern, a trail of destroyed marriages and emptied bank accounts following Jasmine wherever she went. We compiled everything into a dossier that painted a devastating picture of both Raymond and his mistress. Meanwhile, Derek and I continued our assault on Raymond's business. We had already taken 3 of his major clients, and 2 more were in negotiations. His best drivers had all jumped ship, lured by better pay and better treatment. His suppliers were demanding payment in advance because rumors of his financial instability had spread throughout the industry. Raymond was hemorrhaging money, and he couldn't figure out where the bleeding was coming from. He started coming home earlier because there was less and less work to do at the office. He was distracted and anxious, always on his phone, arguing with someone. He barely looked at me anymore, which was fine because I could barely stand to look at him. One afternoon, about 2 weeks before the divorce hearing, I came home from picking up Marcus to find Raymond sitting at the kitchen table with Jasmine. They both looked up when I walked in, and for a moment nobody spoke. Jasmine was the first to break the silence. She smiled, that predatory smile I had seen at the cafe, and stood up, smoothing her designer dress. You must be Denise. I've heard so much about you. I looked at Raymond, my expression carefully blank. You brought her to our home. Raymond had the decency to look uncomfortable. Jasmine and I were just discussing some business matters. She's helping me with the company's finances. I'll bet she is, I thought, but I just nodded. Well, don't let me interrupt. I'll take Marcus to his room. I spent the next hour in Marcus's room playing with blocks and reading stories while Jasmine's laughter drifted through the walls. Every giggle was like a knife in my gut, but I channeled that pain into resolve. 2 more weeks. Just 2 more weeks and this would all be over. That night after Jasmine finally left, Raymond tried to explain himself. "She's just helping with the books, Denise. It's nothing personal." I said nothing. "You're not going to say anything." He sounded almost disappointed, like he wanted a fight. "What would you like me to say?" I asked quietly. "That I'm jealous? That I feel threatened?" He had nothing to say to that. The truth was I didn't feel jealous or threatened anymore. I felt powerful. I knew things Raymond couldn't even imagine. I had resources he didn't know existed. I had allies working around the clock to destroy everything he had built. And in 2 weeks he would find out exactly what happens when you underestimate a woman you called stupid. The night before the divorce hearing, I couldn't sleep. I stood by the window, watching the lights of Charlotte sparkle in the distance, and I thought about everything that had led me to this moment. The lottery ticket that had seemed like a gift, but was really a test. The betrayal that had shattered my heart but forged it back together stronger than before. The months of deception and planning and patience that had brought me to the brink of victory. I thought about my mother, who had claimed a fortune in my name without hesitation. I thought about Patricia, who had believed in my case from the first moment I walked into her office. I thought about Derek, who had trusted me with his second chance at success. I thought about all the women like me who had been underestimated and discarded and told they were worthless. Tomorrow I would strike a blow for all of us. I would show Raymond and every man like him that the quiet ones, the overlooked ones, the country bumpkins and naive housewives were capable of anything. I would walk into that courtroom and I would take back everything that was mine. And I would do it with a smile on my face. The morning of the hearing dawned bright and clear. I dressed in my best suit, a navy blue number that Patricia had helped me pick out. I did my makeup carefully for the first time in years, paying attention to every detail. I looked in the mirror, and I didn't see the tired, defeated woman Raymond had made me feel like. I saw a warrior going into battle. I saw a survivor ready to claim her victory. I saw a mother who would burn down the world to protect her son. I dropped Marcus off at my neighbor's house with a promise to pick him up soon and a heart full of determination. Then I drove to the courthouse, ready to face whatever came next. Raymond was already there when I arrived, looking rumpled and anxious. Jasmine stood beside him in another inappropriately tight dress, her hand possessively on his arm. His cheap lawyer shuffled papers nervously, clearly not prepared for what was about to happen. Patricia was waiting for me at the entrance. She smiled when she saw me and gave my hand a firm squeeze. "Ready? Ready," I said, and I meant it. We walked into that courtroom together, and when I sat down at the plaintiff's table, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. Whatever happened next, I had already won. I had survived. I had fought back. And no matter what the judge decided today, Raymond would never be able to hurt me again. The hearing began, and Raymond's lawyer launched into his prepared speech about financial hardship and equitable distribution, and all the lies Raymond had carefully constructed. He talked about the struggling company and the mounting debts and the reasonable settlement that would allow both parties to move forward with their lives. He made Raymond sound like a victim of circumstance rather than the architect of his own destruction. When it was Patricia's turn, she stood up slowly, deliberately. She let the silence stretch until the tension in the room was almost unbearable. Then she began to dismantle everything Raymond's lawyer had said, piece by piece. She presented the real financial records. She played the recordings of Raymond discussing his plan to defraud me. She introduced evidence of the affair, the gifts, the apartment, Jasmine's history of targeting married men. She showed the photographs of my bruised arm and read Raymond's threats into the record. By the time she was finished, Raymond was slumped in his chair, his face gray and his hands shaking. Jasmine had slowly edged away from him, as if trying to distance herself from the wreckage. His lawyer looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. And then Patricia delivered the final blow. "Your Honor," she said, "my client has also uncovered evidence of extensive tax fraud committed by Mr. Carter over a period of several years. This evidence has been turned over to federal authorities, and we have been informed that an arrest warrant has been issued. I would like to request a brief recess so that the appropriate law enforcement officials can be notified of Mr. Carter's location." The courtroom erupted. Raymond jumped to his feet, shouting objections that made no legal sense. Jasmine tried to slip out the side door, but a bailiff blocked her exit. The judge banged her gavel, demanding order. And I sat quietly in my chair watching the chaos unfold with a calm I had earned through months of suffering and planning. When the federal agents arrived 20 minutes later and led Raymond out in handcuffs, I stood up and walked to the window. I watched as they put him in the back of an unmarked car. Our eyes met for just a moment through the glass, and I saw the exact instant when he understood. Everything he had done to me, every lie, every betrayal, every cruel word had led to this. He had created his own destruction, and he had handed me the tools to finish him. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I just watched as the car pulled away, taking my husband and my past with it. Then I turned back to the courtroom, where the judge was preparing to issue her ruling. The divorce was granted with terms even more favorable than I had hoped. Full custody of Marcus, with no visitation for Raymond, pending his criminal trial. Full ownership of all assets, including those Raymond had tried to hide in his shell company. A restraining order preventing him from coming within 500 feet of me or my son. And a formal declaration that Raymond had acted in bad faith throughout our marriage, entitling me to punitive considerations in any future proceedings. When it was over, Patricia walked me to my car. She was beaming with professional satisfaction, but her eyes were warm. "You did it, Denise. You really did it. We did it," I corrected her. "I couldn't have done any of this without you." She shook her head. "You found the evidence. You planned the strategy. You held it together when most people would have fallen apart. Give yourself some credit. You're a remarkable woman." I drove home in a daze of relief and exhaustion. When I picked up Marcus from my neighbor's house and held him in my arms, I finally let myself cry. Not tears of sadness this time, but tears of overwhelming gratitude. We were free. We were safe. And we had our whole lives ahead of us. That night after Marcus was asleep, I sat on my porch with a glass of wine and watched the stars come out. My phone buzzed with messages from Patricia, from Derek, from my mother, all congratulating me on the victory. But I didn't feel like celebrating. I felt something deeper and quieter. I felt at peace. The woman who had bought that lottery ticket on a rainy afternoon seemed like a stranger to me now. She had been hopeful and naive and desperately in love with a man who didn't deserve her. She had believed that money would solve all her problems, that sharing good fortune with her husband would bring them closer together. She had been wrong about so many things, but she had also been right about one thing. Her life was about to change forever. It just changed in ways she never could have imagined. I raised my glass to the sky, to the universe that had given me a second chance. Then I went inside to check on my sleeping son one more time before bed. He was sprawled across his little bed, arms and legs everywhere, his face peaceful in sleep. I bent down and kissed his forehead and whispered a promise. "I will always protect you, baby. No one will ever hurt us again." Mommy made sure of that. The next morning, the sun rose on the first day of our new life. I made pancakes for Marcus, shaped like Mickey Mouse, just the way he liked them. We ate together at our little kitchen table, laughing about nothing in particular and everything at once. Later, I would call my mother and tell her she could finally stop keeping the secret. Later, I would meet with Patricia to discuss the next steps in Raymond's criminal case. Later, I would call Derek and thank him for being such a crucial part of my plan. But for now, in this moment, there was just me and my son and a future bright with possibility. The money was nice, of course. $34 million opened doors that had always been closed to people like me. It meant Marcus would go to the best schools, have the best opportunities, grow up without ever knowing the kind of struggle I had faced. It meant my mother could retire in comfort, surrounded by the family she loved. It meant I could help other women like me, women who had been underestimated and discarded, build new lives from the ashes of their old ones. But the money wasn't what mattered most. What mattered was that I had discovered my own strength. I had faced a monster, and I had won. I had proven that the quiet ones, the overlooked ones, the ones they called stupid and worthless, had more power than anyone realized. Raymond was in prison now, serving a sentence that would keep him locked up until Marcus was a teenager. Jasmine had been charged as an accessory to fraud and had fled the state to avoid prosecution. The empire Raymond had built on lies and cruelty had crumbled to dust. And I was still standing. More than standing. I was thriving. 2 years after Raymond went to prison, I received a letter from him. It was handwritten on cheap prison stationery, and it arrived at my mother's old address because he didn't know where I lived now. My mother called me immediately, her voice tight with anger. "That man has the nerve to write to you after everything he did. Do you want me to throw it away?" "No," I said after a moment of thought. "Send it to me. I want to see what he has to say." The letter arrived 3 days later, and I sat on my balcony overlooking the Charlotte skyline to read it. Marcus was at school, and the house was quiet. I opened the envelope with steady hands and unfolded the single page inside. "Dear Denise," it began, and I almost laughed at the formality of it. "Dear Denise," as if we were old acquaintances who had simply lost touch rather than a man writing to the woman whose life he had tried to destroy. "I know you probably don't want to hear from me, and I don't blame you. I've had a lot of time to think in here, and I realize now how badly I treated you. I was arrogant and selfish, and I took you for granted. I convinced myself that you were holding me back when really you were the only thing holding me together. Jasmine is gone, of course. She stopped answering my calls after the first month. She found some other guy, some investment banker in Miami, and moved on like I never existed. You were right about her. She never loved me. She loved what I could give her, and when I couldn't give her anything anymore, she disappeared. I'm not writing to ask for forgiveness because I know I don't deserve it. I'm writing because I need you to know that I understand now. I understand what I threw away. I had a wife who loved me unconditionally, a son who looked up to me, a life that most men would envy. And I destroyed it all for what? For a woman who used me. For money I couldn't even enjoy. For an ego that needed constant feeding. I was a fool, Denise. The biggest fool who ever lived. I hope you're happy now. I hope Marcus is doing well. I hope you found someone who treats you the way you deserve to be treated all along. And I hope someday you can find it in your heart to let me see my son again. Not now, I know I haven't earned that right. But someday when he's older, when he can make his own decisions. I just want him to know that his father loved him even if his father was too broken to show it properly. I'm sorry, Denise. For everything. Raymond." I sat with that letter for a long time, watching the clouds drift across the sky. I waited to feel something, anger or satisfaction, or maybe even a flicker of the love I once had for him. But I felt nothing. The man who wrote this letter was a stranger to me now. The Raymond I had married, the Raymond I had loved, had never really existed. He was a character Raymond had played, a mask he wore to get what he wanted. The real Raymond was the one who had called me stupid, who had planned my destruction, who had put his hands on me in our kitchen while our son slept down the hall. That Raymond I knew all too well. I folded the letter carefully and put it back in the envelope. Then I walked to my home office and placed it in a folder labeled Raymond, along with all the other documentation from our marriage and divorce. I didn't throw it away because someday Marcus might want to see it. Someday he might have questions about his father, and I wanted to be able to give him honest answers. But I didn't respond to it either. Raymond had asked for forgiveness, and I had none to give. Not because I was holding on to anger, but because forgiveness implied that what he had done could somehow be made right. It couldn't. You can't unbetray someone. You can't unabuse someone. You can't undestroy a family and expect the pieces to magically fit back together. What you can do is move forward. What you can do is build something new from the wreckage. What you can do is refuse to let the person who hurt you define the rest of your life. And that's exactly what I did. The foundation I started, New Beginnings, grew faster than I ever expected. Within 3 years, we had helped over 500 women escape abusive relationships and rebuild their lives. We provided legal assistance, housing support, job training, therapy, everything a woman needed to start over. I hired survivors to run the programs because they understood what our clients were going through in a way that no textbook could teach. Patricia Webb joined our board of directors and brought her legal expertise to bear on policy changes that made it easier for abuse victims to get restraining orders and emergency custody. Derek contributed a percentage of his company's profits every year and hired several of our program graduates for good-paying jobs in his logistics operation. My mother became our unofficial grandmother figure, showing up at the shelter with home-cooked meals and warm hugs for women who hadn't experienced kindness in years. We were making a difference. Real tangible difference in real people's lives. And every time I saw a woman walk out of our program with her head held high and her future ahead of her, I thought about the woman I used to be. The woman who had stood in her kitchen with bruises on her arm and terror in her heart. The woman who had been told she was worthless by the man who was supposed to love her. That woman had survived and thrived, and now she was helping others do the same. Marcus grew up surrounded by strong women and good men. He saw his mother running a successful organization and his grandmother living her best life. He saw Derek treating his employees with respect and Patricia fighting for justice in the courtroom. He learned that real strength wasn't about domination or control. Real strength was about lifting others up, about using your power to protect the vulnerable, about admitting when you were wrong and doing better. When he asked about his father, I told him the truth in age-appropriate ways. I told him that his daddy had made some very bad choices and had to go away for a while. I told him that sometimes people who love us can still hurt us, and that's not okay. I told him that no matter what his father had done, Marcus was loved completely and unconditionally by everyone in his life. As he got older and the questions became more complex, I gave him more detailed answers. I showed him the court documents and explained what had happened. I let him read Raymond's letter when he was 12 and watched his face as he processed his father's words. He was quiet for a long time after finishing it. Then he looked up at me with eyes that were so much like Raymond's but held none of Raymond's cruelty. "Do you hate him, Mom?" I thought about it carefully before answering. "No, baby, I don't hate him. I used to, I think. Or maybe I just hated what he did to us. But hate takes energy, and I decided a long time ago that I didn't want to spend my energy on him anymore. I wanted to spend it on you and Grandma and the foundation and Thomas and all the good things in my life. Hating your father wouldn't have changed anything he did. It would have just made me miserable." Marcus nodded slowly. "I don't think I hate him either. I don't really feel anything about him. Is that bad?" I pulled him into a hug. "That's not bad at all, baby. You can't miss something you never really had. And you have so many people who love you. You don't need to feel anything about someone who wasn't there for you. It's okay to just feel nothing." He hugged me back tightly. "Thanks, Mom, for everything. For being strong enough to get us out of that situation. For building this amazing life for us. I don't tell you enough, but I'm really proud of you." I cried then, tears of joy streaming down my face as I held my son. All the pain and struggle and sacrifice had been worth it for this moment. For a child who understood what I had done and appreciated it. For a child who was growing into a compassionate and thoughtful young man despite having a father who was neither of those things. "That's all I ever wanted," I whispered into his hair. "For you to be happy and healthy and proud of where you came from. Even the hard parts. The hard parts made us stronger," Marcus said with wisdom beyond his years. "That's what you always say. And I finally understand what you mean." Thomas and I got married when Marcus was 7 in a small ceremony at my mother's house. Thomas was everything Raymond wasn't. Quiet where Raymond was loud. Steady where Raymond was volatile. Genuine where Raymond was fake. He had been a widower when we met, his wife having died of cancer 3 years earlier. He understood loss and grief and the hard work of rebuilding a life. He never tried to replace Raymond as Marcus's father. He simply showed up every day and loved us both unconditionally. He helped Marcus with homework and taught him to play basketball and sat through endless school plays and soccer games. He held me when I had nightmares about the past and celebrated with me when new beginnings reached new milestones. He was a partner in every sense of the word. Our wedding was nothing like my first one. No expensive venue or designer dress or hundreds of guests I barely knew. Just family and close friends gathered in my mother's backyard under a canopy of string lights. Marcus was the ring bearer, and he took his job very seriously, walking down the aisle with the rings on a little pillow and a huge grin on his face. When Thomas and I exchanged vows, I meant every word in a way I hadn't the first time. I had been so young when I married Raymond, so naive about what marriage really meant. I had confused passion with love and charm with character. I had ignored red flags because I wanted so badly to believe in the fairy tale. This time I knew exactly what I was getting into. I knew Thomas's flaws and weaknesses just as he knew mine. I knew that marriage was hard work and that love alone wasn't enough. You needed respect and communication and a willingness to grow together. You needed to be partners, not just lovers. You needed to show up for each other day after day, even when it wasn't easy. Thomas and I had all of that. We had built a relationship on honesty and trust, 2 things that had been completely absent from my first marriage. When I said "I do" this time, I wasn't making a leap of faith. I was making a choice based on years of evidence that this man was exactly who he appeared to be. My mother cried through the whole ceremony. She had been so worried about me for so long, through the terrible years with Raymond and the painful years of rebuilding. Seeing me happy and settled with a good man was everything she had prayed for. "I'm so proud of you," she told me at the reception, holding my face in her hands. "You went through hell, and you came out the other side stronger than ever. Your father would have been so proud too." I missed my father terribly that day. He had died when I was in college, before I ever met Raymond, and I often wondered what he would have thought of my first husband. I like to think he would have seen through Raymond's charm the way my mother had. I like to think he would have warned me to be careful. But maybe I wouldn't have listened. Maybe I needed to learn that lesson the hard way. Either way, I knew he was watching from somewhere, and I hoped he was proud of the woman I had become. The years that followed were the happiest of my life. Thomas and I traveled the world together, visiting places I had only dreamed about when I was clipping coupons and wearing second-hand clothes. We took Marcus to Europe and Asia and South America, showing him how big and beautiful the world was. We built a vacation home on the Outer Banks where my mother could watch the sunrise over the ocean every morning. We donated millions to causes we believed in, from education to healthcare to criminal justice reform. But we never forgot where we came from. I still volunteered at New Beginnings every week, sitting with women who were just starting their journey out of abuse. I told them my story not to brag, but to show them what was possible. I told them about the lottery ticket and the betrayal and the long months of planning and waiting. I told them about the courtroom and the handcuffs and the sweet taste of justice. And I told them the most important thing of all. You are not what he told you you were. You are not stupid or worthless or unlovable. You are a survivor. You are stronger than you know. And you deserve a life full of joy and peace and love. Some of them cried when I said that. Some of them didn't believe me, not yet. But I could see a spark of hope in their eyes. A tiny flame that could grow into something powerful if they let it. That spark was worth more than all the money in the world. When Marcus graduated from high school, he gave a speech as class valedictorian. He talked about resilience and determination and the people who had shaped his life. He talked about his grandmother who had claimed a lottery fortune to save her daughter and grandson. He talked about his stepfather who had shown him what a real man looked like. And he talked about me. My mother, he said, his voice steady and clear, is the strongest person I've ever known. When I was 3 years old, she discovered that my biological father was planning to destroy her. He wanted to leave her with nothing, to take everything she had worked for and disappear with another woman. Most people would have fallen apart. Most people would have given up. But my mother didn't fall apart. She didn't give up. She planned and she fought and she won. Not just for herself, but for me. Everything I have, every opportunity I've been given, every moment of happiness in my life, I owe to her courage. She taught me that strength isn't about never getting knocked down. It's about getting back up every single time. It's about protecting the people you love even when you're scared. It's about building something beautiful from the ashes of something terrible. Mom, I know you're out there crying right now. He grinned and the audience laughed. But I want you to know that I see you. I see everything you did for us. And I am so incredibly grateful and proud to be your son. I was crying, of course. Thomas had his arm around me and my mother was clutching my hand, and I couldn't see through my tears, but I didn't need to. I could hear the applause, could feel the love radiating from everyone around me. This moment, this perfect moment, was worth every second of pain I had endured to get here. After the ceremony, Marcus found me in the crowd and wrapped me in a huge hug. "Thank you, Mom," he whispered. "For everything. Always, baby." I kissed his cheek. Always and forever. That summer before Marcus left for college at Duke, we took one last family trip together. All of us piled into a rented RV and drove across the country, stopping at national parks and roadside attractions and tiny diners in towns we'd never heard of. It was chaotic and cramped and absolutely perfect. One night we camped in Yellowstone, sitting around a fire and watching the stars emerge one by one. The sky was so clear you could see the Milky Way stretching across the darkness like a river of light. Marcus was roasting marshmallows with Thomas, while my mother dozed in her camping chair. I sat apart from them, just watching, trying to memorize every detail of this moment. Thomas caught my eye across the fire and smiled. That smile still made my heart flutter even after all these years. He mouthed the words, "I love you," and I mouthed them back, meaning them with every fiber of my being. I thought about the woman I had been 15 years ago, the woman who had stood outside her husband's office door and heard her world collapse. The woman who had driven home in a daze, clutching a lottery ticket worth $50 million and a heart full of broken pieces. That woman couldn't have imagined this. She couldn't have imagined a husband who loved her genuinely, a son who was heading to a prestigious university, a mother who was healthy and happy, a foundation that had helped hundreds of women rebuild their lives. She couldn't have imagined feeling this content, this at peace, this grateful for every single breath. But here I was, living the life she couldn't have dreamed of. And it wasn't because of the money. The money had helped, of course. It had given me options and security and the ability to fight back. But the money wasn't what had saved me. What saved me was deciding that I was worth saving. What saved me was refusing to accept the story Raymond had written for me. What saved me was finding the strength to write my own story, one page at a time, until I had created something beautiful. The fire crackled and popped, sending sparks spiraling up toward the stars. Marcus laughed at something Thomas said, and the sound echoed across the empty wilderness. My mother stirred in her chair and mumbled something about needing more marshmallows, and I sat there in the darkness, surrounded by everyone I loved, feeling a gratitude so deep it brought tears to my eyes. I had won the lottery twice in my life. The first time was when I bought that ticket at Harris Teeter on a rainy Tuesday. The second time was when I chose to fight for myself and my son instead of accepting defeat. Both wins had changed my life. But the second one, the one that came from inside me, was the one that really mattered. 10 years after Raymond went to prison, he was released on parole. I found out from Patricia, who had kept tabs on him through her law enforcement contacts. He's out, she told me over the phone, living in a halfway house in Raleigh, working at a warehouse. No contact with Jasmine or anyone from his old life. I thanked her for the information and hung up without asking for more details. Raymond's life was no longer my concern. He was a ghost from a past that felt like it belonged to someone else. I didn't tell Marcus about his father's release. He was in his second year of medical school by then, working toward his dream of becoming a pediatric surgeon. He had enough stress without adding Raymond to the mix. If Raymond ever tried to contact him, Marcus was an adult and could make his own decisions about how to respond. But I doubted Raymond would reach out. Prison had probably broken whatever was left of his spirit. The man who had strutted into that courtroom with his mistress on his arm, so confident in his plan to destroy me, was gone. In his place was a middle-aged ex-convict with no money, no connections, no future. The world had moved on without him. I had moved on without him. And that was the best revenge of all. Sometimes I still thought about what would have happened if I hadn't won the lottery. If I had walked into that office and heard Raymond with Jasmine, but had no resources to fight back. Would I have collapsed? Would I have signed those papers and walked away with nothing? Would I have lost Marcus to a man who saw him as a bargaining chip rather than a son? I like to think I would have found the strength to fight regardless. I like to think the lottery was just a tool, and that I would have found other tools if that one hadn't been available. But I wasn't sure. The money had given me options that most women in my situation didn't have. It had allowed me to hire the best lawyer, to fund the investigation into Raymond's crimes, to invest in Derek's company and destroy Raymond's business from the outside. Without that money, I would have been fighting with one hand tied behind my back. That's why new beginnings mattered so much to me. That's why I poured so much of my time and energy and resources into helping other women. Not every abuse victim won the lottery. Not every woman had a mother who could claim a fortune in her name. Most women had to fight with whatever scraps they could find, had to navigate a system that was often stacked against them, had to claw their way to freedom inch by painful inch. I wanted to give those women tools. I wanted to give them lawyers and housing and job training and, most importantly, hope. I wanted them to know that escape was possible, that a better life was waiting for them, that they deserved to be happy and safe and loved. I wanted to be for them what the lottery had been for me, a stroke of luck that changed everything. By the time I turned 50, new beginnings had expanded to 12 cities across the Southeast. We had a staff of over 200 people, an annual budget of $15 million, and a waiting list of women who needed our help. The demand always exceeded our capacity, no matter how much we grew. There was just so much need, so many women trapped in situations they couldn't escape alone. But we kept growing. We kept fighting. We kept showing up for women who had no one else to show up for them. And slowly, one life at a time, we were making a difference. Patricia retired from the board when she turned 70, but she never really stopped working. She mentored young lawyers who wanted to focus on domestic violence cases, teaching them the tricks she had learned over decades in the courtroom. She came to every New Beginnings gala, always the best-dressed person in the room, always with a story about some case she had won or some scumbag she had put behind bars. She was my hero, and I told her so every chance I got. Derek sold his company for an enormous sum when he turned 60 and immediately invested most of it in a new venture, a training program for people coming out of prison who wanted to work in logistics. He said he had been given a second chance and he wanted to pay it forward. The program was named Phoenix Rising, and it became one of New Beginnings' closest partners, providing jobs to women whose abusers had left them with criminal records or employment gaps. My mother lived to be 93. She spent her last years in the cottage on my property, surrounded by her daughter and grandson and great-grandchildren. Yes, Marcus gave me 3 of them, absolutely spoiled rotten. She passed peacefully in her sleep one spring morning, with the sun streaming through her window and photographs of her family covering every surface. At her funeral, I told the story of the lottery ticket, how she had gone to the lottery office in disguise and claimed $50 million in her name, how she had kept the secret for months while I planned my escape from Raymond, how she had trusted me completely even when she didn't fully understand what I was doing. Without her, I said, my voice breaking, none of this would have been possible. She was my rock, my confidant, my partner in the most important battle of my life. She taught me that family isn't about blood or legal documents. It's about showing up for each other when it matters. It's about keeping secrets that need to be kept and telling truths that need to be told. It's about loving unconditionally even when love is hard. Marcus spoke at the funeral, too. He talked about the grandmother who had made him pancakes every Saturday morning and helped him with his homework and came to every single one of his school events. He talked about how she had been there for his medical school graduation, beaming with pride as he accepted his diploma. He talked about how she had held his first child in her arms and wept with joy. She was the best grandmother anyone could ask for, he said, and she was the bravest woman I ever knew besides my mother. She put everything on the line to help us escape from a bad situation. She never hesitated, never doubted, never wavered. That's the kind of person I want to be. That's the legacy she left behind. We scattered her ashes at the beach house she loved so much, watching them drift out over the waves toward the horizon. It felt right, sending her off into the endless blue sky she had watched every morning from her porch. She was free now, finally at rest after a long and eventful life. I stayed at the beach house for a week after the funeral, just me and Thomas, walking along the shore and talking about the past and the future. We were getting older now, both of us, with gray hair and creaky joints and more years behind us than ahead. But we still had so much to look forward to, grandchildren to watch grow up, trips to take, causes to support. And we still had each other. On our last night at the beach, I stood on the porch where my mother used to sit and watch the stars come out. The same stars that had watched over us in Yellowstone all those years ago. The same stars that had witnessed my darkest moments and my brightest triumphs. They didn't care about human drama, those distant suns. They just kept shining, indifferent to the small lives unfolding beneath them. But somehow that indifference was comforting. It reminded me that my problems, as huge as they had seemed at the time, were just tiny specks in the vast universe. It reminded me that pain was temporary but love was eternal. It reminded me that no matter what happened, the sun would rise tomorrow and the stars would come out again and life would go on. I'm happy, I said out loud, to no one in particular. I'm really genuinely happy, and it felt like a miracle. After everything I had been through, after the betrayal and the abuse and the long years of rebuilding, I had arrived at a place of genuine contentment. Not the fake happiness I had performed during my marriage to Raymond. Not the desperate hope that things would get better if I just tried harder. Real happiness, earned through struggle, built on a foundation of love and trust and self-respect. I went back inside where Thomas was reading by the fire. He looked up when I entered and smiled that smile that still made my heart flutter. Everything okay? Everything is perfect, I said, and I meant it. I sat down next to him and took his hand and we watched the fire together in comfortable silence. Outside, the waves crashed against the shore in their eternal rhythm. Inside, we were warm and safe and loved. And that was enough. That was more than enough. That was everything. The next morning, we packed up the beach house and drove back to Charlotte, back to our life, back to the foundation and the grandchildren and all the beautiful ordinary moments that made up a happy existence. The road stretched ahead of us, full of possibility and promise. I didn't know what the future held, I never had and I never would. But I knew one thing for certain. Whatever came next, I would face it with courage and grace, and the knowledge that I had already survived the worst thing that ever happened to me. I had taken a lottery ticket and a broken heart and turned them into a life beyond my wildest dreams. I had proven that the quiet ones, the overlooked ones, the ones they called stupid and worthless, were capable of anything. I had shown my son what strength really looked like, and I had found happiness, real genuine lasting happiness, on the other side of devastation. The woman who had won $50 million and rushed to her husband's office with joy in her heart was gone now. In her place was someone stronger, wiser, more compassionate. Someone who had learned that the greatest victories aren't the ones that come from luck. They're the ones that come from choosing to fight even when the odds are against you. They're the ones that come from refusing to let anyone else write your story. They're the ones that come from love, stubborn, persistent, unconditional love for yourself, and the people who matter most. I looked at Thomas in the driver's seat, at the road unwinding before us, at the blue Carolina sky stretching to infinity. And I smiled, a genuine smile, the smile of a woman who had been through hell and come out the other side. The smile of a woman who had won. The end of my story isn't really an end. It's a beginning, one that's still being written with every passing day. Marcus is a successful surgeon now, saving children's lives just like he always dreamed. His kids call me Grandma Denise, and they have no idea about the darkness that once threatened to consume our family. They only know that their grandmother loves them fiercely, and that family is the most important thing in the world. Thomas and I are planning a trip to Italy for our 20th anniversary. We're going to eat pasta and drink wine and walk through ancient streets holding hands like teenagers. We're going to be grateful for every moment we have together because we both know how precious time is. New Beginnings celebrated its 20th anniversary last year. We've helped over 10,000 women rebuild their lives. 10,000 stories of survival and triumph, 10,000 reasons to keep fighting, 10,000 reminders that the work is never done. And me? I'm still here, still standing, still smiling. I won $50 million and I almost lost everything to a man who thought I was worthless. But in the end, I kept the money and I kept my son, and I built a life that the scared woman outside her husband's office door couldn't have imagined. I don't think about Raymond much anymore. He's just a character from a story that ended a long time ago. But when I do think about him, I don't feel anger or hatred or even sadness. I feel something closer to pity. He had everything: a wife who loved him, a son who adored him, a chance at a good life, and he threw it all away for greed and ego. He's old now, alone, forgotten, and I'm surrounded by love. That's the real victory. Not the money, not the revenge, not the satisfaction of watching him get handcuffed in that courtroom. The real victory is this moment right now, this ordinary Tuesday morning, drinking coffee on my porch while my husband reads the paper and my grandchildren's laughter echoes from somewhere in the house. The real victory is happiness. And I won. I really won. And they lived happily ever after with the biggest smile you